We offset 4 tons of CO2 emissions with the help of our community by not eating red meat for 2 weeks. The sun is giving off its rays, and they're supposed to bounce off the earth and back out, but with the too much CO2, it's creating the greenhouse gases, and that's acting like a blanket, and it's not letting the rays bounce back out. So they're staying on the earth, and it's making it too hot. So that's why we did our CO2 reduction experiment. So the sun is giving off its rays, and they're supposed to bounce off the earth and back out to the atmosphere. But with too much CO2, it's creating the greenhouse gases, and they're sort of acting like a blanket and not letting the sun's rays bounce back out. So now those rays are staying on the earth, and it's getting too hot. And that's why we did our CO2 offset.
So just to comment on the poster with the greenhouse gases and the CO2. CO2 or carbon dioxide is one of the naturally occurring greenhouse gases that keep the Earth temperate. Without these gases in the atmosphere, we would just be another cold, icy planet that could not support life. So CO2, water vapor, methane, of the like, those are all gases that absorb outgoing solar radiation and traps it into the atmosphere. And when you get too much of it built up, it actually exacerbates that effect and makes things far worse than the normal temperate Earth.
So it traps itself in the water and other gases.
Yep.
And that's what creates what can be considered a blanket effect.
Exactly.
Trapped gases. Great.
Picture of where CO2 goes in the tree and oxygen is released. It is sustainable for animals and the environment. And in the second picture, it's a picture of a tree cut down and where the animals have no home, and the CO2 is everywhere and there's not enough oxygen.
This poster is about CO2 production. The factory makes CO2 from cutting down forest to make land to graze, and that releases CO2 into the air, and the energy made to produce red meat is also makes CO2 that goes into the air. The red meat truck makes CO2 from transporting the meat, which causes CO2 to flow into the air, and which causes acid rain, which can kill plants that give us oxygen.
CO2 itself isn't bad, it's just too much CO2 is... Okay, so I agree with Emily completely because we need CO2 in the air because plants need it a little bit. Okay, so it is true that too much CO2 isn't sustainable in our...
This is Susan. I just want to make a quick comment about the link between carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and transportation. Most transportation is by the burning of fossil fuels, diesel, gasoline, and the like. And basically what fossil fuels are is, millions of years ago, all these trees and biomass and ferns and dead animals that had carbon in their structure fossilized and went into the ground and turned into fuel. So when that fuel is pumped to the surface and then refined and then burned in airplanes and trucks, it's releasing that stored fossilized CO2. So that's the connection.
Well, I think it's also important to remember that the production of red meat, not only are forests cut down for the actual animals, but they're cut down so that feed can be grown to feed the animals. So I think it's another way in which producing meat is giving off CO2, not just related directly to the beef.
We are not judging, nor not telling you to not eat red meat. We are showing you the benefits to your life.
Hi, this is Zach. I think you've all done a great job with your project of offsetting carbon by not eating meat. I also wanted to say a word about grass-fed beef, which is a better kind of beef to have. The cows are happier, there's less of them, there's less of a carbon impact, and also they tend to restore the soil. When you have factory grown beef, there's too many cows and the waste doesn't have any time to break down. But with grass-fed beef, the cows sort of walk it into the soil. It helps the soil to retain a lot of moisture, and it's healthier for crops, it's healthier for the cows, and it's healthier for people because you have healthy cows that you end up eating.
Having Jenna Nord come to our school is a great thing. She taught us how to make a nutritious, sustainable, and simple snack. Having the green smoothie, I personally loved it and have made it at home. And it gives you a lot of the nutrients you need to have a healthier life. And last but not least, hi, I'm Caroline, and a Harvard professor came into our classroom named Zach and talked to us about good and bad CO2. A good CO2 is when it comes from different plants like trees and sometimes flowers. Bad CO2 is when there's too much of it, and then it also comes from transporting different types of goods. I kind of disagree with Caroline. I think a good carbon is when there's a good amount of CO2 in the air and it's sustainable. And a bad carbon is when there's too much CO2 in the air and it's not sustainable and it's making it. When the Harvard professor, Zach, came to Green Team, he taught us more about sustainable CO2 levels and also talked about how we can make a bigger difference in the CO2 offset experiment. Getting a regular hamburger here from the Amazon gives off a lot of CO2. This makes the rivers and oceans too warm. The cold water fish can't handle the warm water. Now the fish are dying. So buying a local turkey burger. I am Nikki, and from this experiment I learned about red meat production. One day I was online and wanted silly bands. I also learned that how it gets to my home is the same as red meat transportation. It would be better if I walked to Walgreens and used no fuel.